Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and over my last few fake natty videos, something I pointed out is the large round cap delts that tend to appear more frequently in people who are on anabolics than people who are not. And I also raised that point with females if when you see that in females and or testosterone, usually anabolics. Very few women use testosterone, but a few do. And some people ask, hey, why is it that there are more androgen receptors in the shoulders, like the deltoids, the trapezius, the upper pecs, things like that? What is it about the human body that we have that? Is there some evolutionary purpose for this? Is there some purpose for this historically? Why have we developed this? And you don't necessarily see that always in other species. And that's a fantastic question, and biologists and anthropologists have a few theories on this. And to the best of my knowledge, this is multifold in nature. It seems to have a couple different purposes, primarily socially. It's not necessarily something we needed for strength or power or anything, because we're not really a power-oriented species. We're really an endurance-oriented species, and that's something I'm going to cover in a later video because that's come up as well. But one of the first things is that it allows other tribes to identify males from a distance. You have to remember with our species, Homo sapien, we know that we've been around approximately 200,000 years. We also evolved from previous species that have been around for millions of years. And there was always a bit of tribal warfare. There was some trading and things all throughout history, but there was a lot of tribal warfare. There was a lot of dominance. There was a lot of fighting between different tribes. And the ability to identify males from females at long distance, and again, females having breasts on the front of their body, versus males allowed members of other tribes to identify a possible threat. And if the men looked larger from a distance, and you're going to look largest depending upon the size of your shoulders when someone's looking at you at 100, 200, 300 yards, further out there, or even further away. So men who have wider, bigger shoulders are going to look larger from a distance. They're going to be perceived as a stronger potential military or fighting threat. So it's really a form of peacocking in a way. And that's one of the biggest reasons you saw is right there from tribe to tribe. But there are also factors inside of a given tribe. One, it also allowed the females of the tribe, when selecting mates, to figure out which males had the highest testosterone levels. Because again, the higher your testosterone levels, the more your shoulders and things are going to grow, the larger they're going to be without any sort of resistance training. And keep in mind, these people were all physically active. It's only been in the modern world that anyone other than royalty has been allowed to be sedentary. When you go back to tribal culture, which is 99.9% of all human history, any sort of tribal culture, all the men have to work. They're all extremely physically active. So they are going to have a decent amount of muscle mass as long as they aren't having starvation issues here. And again, the men with the higher testosterone levels are going to have the larger shoulders because we as a species have more androgen receptors in our shoulders. So their shoulders would be larger. It would allow the women to identify who the strongest males were, who are most likely to give them stronger children, be better protection for them. And that's a big point there. Again, when you're living in that sort of environment, a more tribal culture, having a male who can protect you was far more important than it might be today. It's still important today, but in that sort of time period, in that sort of environment, that was massively important. Who could protect you, could protect your children, most likely to be strong enough to survive, be a leader. And again, being a strong male with leadership abilities and strength and prowess is possibly going to give her stronger children who have a better chance of survival also. So it allowed females to kind of pick them out a little bit. And the next thing that it comes to is also when dealing with other men of the tribe. The tribal cultures tend to be a little hierarchical. You oftentimes have more dominant males who are in charge. They run things, they're the leaders. And having larger shoulders will give men a higher sense of authority. And then again, in many cultures like that, oftentimes if a man is going to have a higher authority, oftentimes he might have had more than one wife. So again, a higher chance of passing his genes on. So again, repeatedly you see these different factors to where the men who have larger shoulders, which is again caused by the testosterone levels, tend to pass their genes on. Well, you get larger shoulders by having higher androgen receptors as a male. So these are the men who had the highest chance over time of passing their genes on. And it doesn't seem like as big of a chance. It's not like they're going to have 10 times a higher chance. It's going to be slightly higher. But when you have something that just gives you a slightly higher chance of having your genes passed on, having children, having them survive, it is going to, over 100 or 1,000 generations, increase that trait in the species. And so by these men with more androgen receptors in their shoulders, being more intimidating to other tribes at a distance, they're less likely to be attacked, therefore higher chance of their whole tribe surviving. So you've got that factor. Then you've got the fact that it was a trait to identify to the females who the stronger males were, a form of peacocking for, again, selecting a mate. And then the last thing is the being seen as a leader, someone that's going to be listened to, an authority figure, which again, in some cases might have led to having more wives, more partners, things like that over time, so producing more children. So it's a trait that through three different mechanisms socially would have led to a slightly higher rate of children being conceived or produced by these men. And so accordingly, the trait increased over time after generation, and after 1,000 or more generations, it became a trait that we see in our species. And so there are perfectly valid evolutionary reasons for why we see this higher androgen receptor count in humans and Homo sapien. And so again, but it's how the body will respond to testosterone in those muscle groups. And so accordingly, when you see females who have really well developed shoulders, we see that as a masculine trait because we know that men have big shoulders and women do not, big round deltoids and traps and things. We identify that with a male trait, and the reason for it is that we as a species have more androgen receptors there. So the females who have very masculine looking shoulders, as a general rule, are oftentimes putting male hormones into their body, and anabolic steroids are all male hormones. And so again, that's why that is one of the easiest ways to pick them out. So hopefully that clarifies all that and people understand a little better maybe why we have that trait as a species and what it means. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.